everyone, today I'm here to discuss episode 19 of Neverafter, the latest Dimension 20 season, which is also part 1 of the two-part finale of the season of Neverafter. And I think it's because it's obviously been such a long season. It was 20, which I think is the most we've ever gotten for a Neverafter season. Normally they're like 16, 17, and then the mini side quests are even shorter than that. But this one was 20, so I feel like it has been forever since, like, we've just come so far, you know, from where we started. But it's also been a long time coming. Like, I have for the longest time always said that I could not picture what the finale of this was going to look like, just because there were so many potential villains, actual villains, who was the big bad. And I think I went into this season with a very kind of stereotypical D&D kind of outlook on it of there's going to be a big bad and we're going to have the big fight and everything. And I think one thing that you cannot say about Dimension 20 with Neverafter is that it's been anything but typical and usual. And I mean that in the best way possible. It completely always turns your expectations on its head. And I think especially in terms of villains, like I said, that was always the biggest thing for me, was like, who is going to be the big bad? And we kind of got 3 factions of big bads, which I think is really interesting to be fighting, rather than like one entity or one goal in general that you're against, to be fighting 3 different people who are kind of aligned differently on a spectrum, or at least in different ways. So we've got the fairies, we've got the princesses, and we've got the stepmother. In part 1, we only focused on fighting the princesses, which for me, the biggest shocker of the whole season was finding out what happened with the princesses, because I was so convinced for so long that they were right. I mean, before we found out like their gigantic plan, then I was like, oh no, 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 no. But I mean, these princesses who had lost so much and wanted to now be seemingly in control of their own destiny, like how could you be against that? And I think a really smart way to introduce the princesses was through Rosamund, who we already knew so well and trusted so well, because they obviously had a similar story to hers in terms of like they weren't in control of their story and obviously had lost a lot, like I said. So you kind of automatically assume that they would be like Rosamund, and I think it was a good reminder that just because you think you know like a character, right, does not mean that all the characters are going to be the same. So just because we knew one princess and what she was like and what she believed in didn't mean that we knew exactly what all of them were up to. And it also meant that you can have seemingly allies, but it doesn't mean that they're selling you and telling you on the full picture. And I think what was also interesting to me in terms of like the fairies more so versus the princesses is I think the princesses to me seemed a little bit more divided on their kind of conviction and loyalty to the idea of ending the Neverafter and ending all stories, whereas the fairies all seem to be kind of uniformly in line with wanting the world to stay how it is. And I think that makes sense for kind of how drastic an idea it is. It made sense that like one of the things that the players could do was to try and do some persuasion checks, and depending on their relationships with the characters and where the characters were at in that moment, that they could then persuade them back to their side. So I was really happy that Mira was actually the first one we got to persuade back, because I think she's my favorite princess. Like, taking Rosamund out of the equation, because obviously like Rosamund's one of the main characters, so like she's always like I feel like there's the princesses and then there's Rosamund, right? But out of the princesses, I've gone back and forth so much on who is my favorite, but I have definitively decided that it is Mira. Like, I think I fell in love with her when, well, first of all, I fell in love when like Pinocchio was talking her back to their side and being like, you know, like, I get feeling like you've lost everything and feeling like that you're never getting that back, but he's like, a world in which you have the chance to get that back is better than nothing at all. And her being like, I don't want my story to end here, and he's like, it won't. Like, that was just so great. But then I truly, truly fell in love with her when she just went and stomped Snow White in the head 3 times as her attack. Like, I have always had a soft spot for rogues. Those are my favorite character and subclass, and I love playing rogues, but I also just love when it's like a character that, like, for all intents and purposes, like, does another thing when they just like switch that. So like, obviously Rogue's very sneaky, very, you know, I think Mira had daggers, I want to say, was her thing that she could do, but like obviously that's kind of like her forte, and I just like that it just became this line of roundhouse thing of like, I'm just gonna stomp on her head a couple times and see if it works. Like, I really, really like that. So I was glad that we got Mira on our side. I was also very impressed with how quickly they got Mira and Elodie on their side. Like, that was really great, and thankfully the roles were on their side in that case. I also liked how, I mean, I think there were some that were just like, is anyone irredeemable? I don't know. Is anyone impossible to sway back to the other side? I think the dice would decide that, but I do think Rapunzel had to go. Like, I feel like she just was so bad, and like a good villain because like you really did not like her. Like the whole scene with Gerard and her last episode where she was like, you have that sword of truth, right? Why don't you take it out and ask if your wife still loves you? Like, she just, it feels like it was her plan. I think originally this plan, it was either her or Snow White, but I feel like her, and then it just kind of expounded from there. And like, I think her, Snow White, and Cinderella were really the ones that had the conviction and the drive in it. So to have her, and especially the way that she was killed off with Gerard getting to eat her and being like, you said I didn't have any friends, but my wife is my friend now. I think it was just a good like full circle moment and nice poetry. Same with getting Snow White killed by Rosamund, especially after she had got a critical hit on Rosamund earlier and taken her out of the game to then have Rosamund turn it back around. And I loved their whole exchange too when Rosamund went down for the first time, when Snow White was like, out of anyone I expected you to understand like where I'm coming from the most, and Rosamund said, out of everyone I expected you to not want to die the most or to live the most or something like that. And I just think that was a really good moment because I think it shows where it's like, you can have people that really like each other and, you know, really on paper seem like they get along and do get along, but then they just have this one issue that they can't see eye to eye on, and how it can truly like break a friendship. And I think that's one of the more like interesting things to explore that I feel like doesn't get explored a lot in media and stuff like that, of just like how it's not like one big thing necessarily or like this big fight or something like that. It's just this one idea that you can't see eye to eye on, and like you can see where it's like, you were a disappointment, you know? Like, I expected you to be on my side with this, and when it boils down to it, you just become a disappointment. So I think the fight was really, really cool, but it does worry me that, like, they're so, like, depleted on spells and hit points and stuff like that, and now they have 3 or 2 other factions of villains to fight, but, like, multiple fairies, and then the stepmother, who is probably, I think, probably worse than the princesses and the fairies combined in terms of what she can do. And based on the preview for next week, it looks like things are going to get very, very dire, and it's going to be all up to Timothy's spell if they can pull it off or not to try and fix this, undo this. I still don't know, and it's like 19 episodes in. I can't picture what the final like third of this season will look like if it'll reset and they won't have their memories or something like that, and everyone will just go back to like living the life. This is assuming they win, right? Like, because it could be that they lose and then everything's just awful. But I'm saying, like, do they like lose their memories of each other and then they just kind of reset? Do they just get flung back to their original worlds and kind of go from there? Like, their idea obviously is to give everyone their own book, but then we also have to worry about the authors, which I think maybe it was the fairies, maybe it was the stepmother, but I feel like when they were saying like they sensed like a presence that was turning on now that like the ink spell was in effect, I feel like that was the authors, but it also could have been the stepmother, I think, now that I think about it, because they said it was a malevolent force, whereas I think the authors have been described as kind of like neutral, and like they don't really care one way or another, they just want their story to happen. So that might have been that, but yeah, it definitely has me concerned for like, they did really good in this fight. They did so good. I'm so proud of them with how well they did with like the spells and figuring everything out, and like I said, getting the allies on their side so quickly was so awesome. But I just worry for like, I mean, 2 of them are down to single-digit hit points, correct? And then I feel like a lot of them are out of spells, and it just seems like now it's like, okay, phase 2 and phase 3, but I don't know if they're gonna, it doesn't seem like they're gonna have time to reset and like get those spell slots back and stuff like that. So it's definitely concerning. Like, I'm proud. I love this episode. I loved like Ylfa throwing or dropping, I guess I should say, the Beauty and the Beast character, the Beast, off of the ledge after trying and failing to convince her to join their side. I just love that she was like, we gotta let it go then. That was really funny. And I think just seeing their conviction and kind of being like, you know, we don't have all the answers, but it's the fact that we don't have the answers, like, you're gonna make the answer. You know what I mean? Like, we're not telling you like, oh, your life is gonna be so great and so wonderful after this. Like, you're gonna marry a prince, you're gonna fall in love, you're gonna have your happily ever after. Like, they're just saying, and that's what's convincing people to join their side of, you're gonna get to choose. And I think that's just really sweet, and that's what it boils down to. And part of me wonders if it's not too late to convince the stepmother, like if she gets her own story, or if she's just too far gone into what she's become. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out, but I feel like it's bad to say this maybe, because maybe I'm being optimistic, but after how the fight with the princess went, I'm more hopeful that they can, you know, handle the fairies and the stepmother. And I think what is good about if they come in at the same time, then they'll also have to be dealing with each other, because that was kind of the only bad thing of like, I wish the fairies had come in like earlier or something, because then they also would have been fighting the princes, and that kind of would have taken some pressure off of the players, because now you would have had NPCs fighting the NPCs as opposed to them trying to fight all these different fights on different fronts. So I am a little worried about that. I really do hope all the characters make it, but I could see someone teaming up for like some epic sacrifice where like they throw themselves into the lines and get shredded so other people's stories can live or something like that. And I've just become so attached to these characters, and it just doesn't feel like it could possibly be wrapped up. Like I think Emily even said it at the end of this episode where she's like, what are we gonna do? Like, how are we gonna wrap this up? There's so many people to fight. And that's what it feels like. Not only the fight of how are they gonna win this, but then afterwards of what it's gonna look like. Not knowing is very interesting. It definitely gets my anxiety up because I like to know like, oh, like we'll get a nice little epilogue afterwards, and we don't know that for sure. And we also don't know if these characters will fully stay together. Like, I feel like there's still part of me that's like, oh, maybe Gerard will turn back into a human. Maybe Pinocchio will get to be a real boy, even though they gave those up for Baba Yaga. Like, the possibilities for me are so open, and I really have a lot of hope that this can end on a hopeful note, but it is the horror season, and knowing how it started, I just worry that everyone's not going to make it through it. So yeah, if you have seen the first part to this finale of the Never After, please let me know your thoughts and your theories and what you think is going to happen in the next episode and what you hope happens, I guess, in the next episode, like good ending, bad ending, all that kind of stuff, and what you thought of this fight and taking down the princesses, because like I said, getting Rapunzel, getting Snow White, all in, like, Rapunzel and Snow White Rapunzel felt really, really good. Snow White felt good, but like Rapunzel just, I think they all said it, where she was like the worst villain. Like, she was the one they all wanted to see go, and to get her and the way she got, like, I was very happy with that. So I'm going to be riding that high for a while, and yeah, we'll have to see what happens in the finale. I'm very nervous. It's the horror season, but I have faith that the characters are going to come out at least personally happy, you know, even if not everyone makes it. I think sacrificing themselves for their friends will give them happiness, and I don't know, we'll see. So yeah, thank you guys all so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!